right.
Sit up properly. You're live.
Hi, everyone. Barry McGuire here for Barry McGuire's Creative Real Estate Education Group. It's the Monday main event. We meet up every Monday and talk about all things real estate, particularly creative real estate. We've had on insurance brokers and tax people and guys who know about credit scores, foreclosures, developers, a wide range of things that you folks are interested in because you're on the creative side of things. Most of you know Donna and I run focus workshops as well. We did our first one on May 7th and 8th, the famous Rapid Cash program. We did that in Calgary, first live event in 3 long COVID years. So we were very happy to do that. And we have our next one coming up September 24th, this time in Edmonton. And that's going to be a 1-day rather than a 2-day event. And it's going to be all about agreements for sale, which really agreements for sale are a strategy that is employed a lot. As a matter of fact, I got a phone call from a guy in Calgary who's on the commercial side of things. And he said he reads what I do about AFS. And he said he uses AFS all the time on the commercial side. And he has some really technical, interesting questions to ask me. So I was, really enjoyed hearing that some of the things that we talk about and that you folks have found valuable are kind of permeating the investment space. So that was good to hear. All right, so today we are going to talk about virtual assistants. Last week we had on the lovely Tembi Becca. I think Tembi was in one of our very first Rapid Cash programs 10 or so years ago, from Africa, a refugee to Canada, got a nursing ticket, found the RAIN group, the Real Estate Investment Network, found us, took our course, and was so empowered, wanting to help women who have been abused, lots of spousal abuse, where Tembi came from in Zimbabwe. Of course, not limited to Zimbabwe, is it? Spousal abuse is everywhere. Anyway, Tembi took her creative training and helped a bunch of folks in Africa buy property using creative strategies. I was so proud of her. Can you imagine taking a concept that she learned in really Edmonton, Alberta, and she went off to Africa and showed people the agreement for sale strategy adapted for a local network and did a lot of work in that area. And then she, wanting to help more really women who've been in abusive relationships, started a company that trains African women and actually women from all over the world now to be virtual assistants. So we had a great conversation last week. And this week we have on Andrea Workington and Julia Pereira, who are, hello, ladies.
Hello.
Julia and Andrea have experience with virtual assistants and lots of it. They've been doing it for a long time. And Tembi gave us a pretty good broad outline of what a virtual assistant could do for you. She talked about having a, kind of a procedure manual for what you did in your business. You could take what you do, analyze what you'd like to give to some other talented person because you're out of time, and then let your virtual assistant help you. So we're going to hear from Andrea and Julia today on the practical side of virtual assistants. But before we do, because it's always interesting, I always find it interesting. Let's hear from Julia first. Julia, big smile. Look at that. I love it. Let's hear from Julia on kind of where you got started, post high school. You don't have to give us, every day post high school, but into your job and how you found real estate particularly, and then where you took your real estate journey kind of to where you are now. And then we'll let Andrea have a crack at doing that same thing. So, Julia.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for having me. So my real estate journey actually started before high school. I was one of those kids that grew up with parents who were immigrants to the country, and they had rental properties. And so I was painting properties on weekends and picking up rent checks with my dad, cleaning out garbage, that type of thing. And the irony is it actually turned me off of real estate, and it actually kind of I had this goal that I had to have a designation because my parents had come to the country and they were doing like labor jobs. So went off to university, received an undergrad in kinesiology, and then became an occupational therapist. So I'm a registered healthcare professional. And so I've done that for quite a few years. I'm going into my 22nd year. Don't do too much math. And what's really kind of brought me back to it is, one, I did enjoy components of it, but mostly was as I've been doing my profession and giving recommendations and suggestions to people as they've had health impairments, I've realized how much funding there isn't out there. And it became very clear quickly that, especially myself being a consultant, I don't have a pension. I don't have that extra funding coming in from anywhere. I pay for health benefits and whatnot. And it became clear that I needed another avenue. I needed something else to step into. So fast forward, got into real estate investing, started with the house hacking like everyone does.
Yes.
And I actually did that in university with one of my dad's houses, which was great. And then did it myself when I purchased the house once I moved out to BC. And then got into what I knew. I got into single family homes, duplexes, because it's what I knew. It's what I had seen my parents do. Not saying this as anything, but after taking your creative strategy course, despite not being an individual who went and did the agreement for sale and the vendor take back and whatnot from scratch, it actually opened up my eyes to the diversity of what you can do in real estate, and that I didn't just have to be a property manager for my own properties and whatnot. And it really opened my eyes up to joint venturing. So since then, I've gotten into multifamily joint venturing, private lending. I've invested in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and I'm presently in Portugal. And I'm here with my family more. That's the primary reason, but looking at some lifestyle investments out here. And then the beautiful thing about this is in my own career, I do a lot of mentoring. And from the education side, I've started some masterminds with Andrea. We're focusing on people who are 9-to-5ers in the real estate industry. So kind of like what I'm doing. I do part-time consultant and whatnot. And then we're both founders of Ace Life Investors. And I've also become a Smithman certified ambassador. So it's been fantastic. I've been able to combine a lot of passions.
You've done a lot. You have done a ton of things as Andrea. So Andrea, let's move over to you and tell us about you and your journey to get to here.
Yes. Well, I grew up in a family that lived paycheck to paycheck, and I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to repeat that. So when I started my career in policing, I read a lot of books on everything from investing in the stock market to real estate. And that's what led me to joining the RAIN group back in 2005 and eventually moving out to Alberta with my husband and 2-month-old baby in 2006. And I haven't looked back since. So I started with the long-term buy and holds, and then started with the creative strategies back in 2008, 2009, when we went through all those courses together, Barry, and progressed from there to multifamily and now developing. So along with Julia and Brenda Bastel, doing the Ace Life coaching venture, which is tons of fun as well. So, yeah.
Well, you both have done so many things. So before we get into the virtual assistant side, and so we don't run out of time at the end, just tell us a wee bit about Ace Life Investors so that people can get a sense of what you guys are doing. Sir Donna will have contact details up in the chat. So let's hear about that a little bit before we move on to virtual assistants.
Okay. Well, we're just completing our 8-week beta program, which was our first set of students. And so we'll be launching again in September. But essentially, it's a very specific program. And what kind of sets us apart from other coaching programs is we get to know the people first to figure out what they actually want to learn, not what we think they should learn.
Right.
So So then we tailor the 8-week plan to what everyone wants to learn. And so we have a couple of sessions, an information session once a week and a Q&A once a week and some accountability and a book club and all this fun stuff. So it's a great way for people to get coaching on the things that they specifically want. So as an example, we had people who wanted to learn about seller financing, but nobody was really interested in rent to own. So we didn't really talk about it. But we did talk about seller financing and about your event that's coming up on September 24th. So we're super excited.
Yes.
To be there for that as well. So
I like that idea. I was saying to my team lead in my real estate department that I thought we should be doing this and this and this to improve our systems and how we do things. She went, Barry, do you think maybe we should ask the staff what they think they'd like to improve and fix? What a concept, actually giving people what they say they want and need. So I'm big in that. So your course is what you do is like, it's going to be different all the time because people will have different things they want. That each set of students will have different things. So good thing you guys have the wide ranging set of experience that you have, because you can, I'm pretty sure, cover all the bases that people will want to learn about. So anyway, I'll encourage anybody who thinks they would like the kind of stuff that Andrea and Julia and Brenda are doing to get in touch with them and we sign up for one of those 8-week courses. We should sign up for that, Donna.
Yeah, when are we going to
When do we
do that?
Donna says she'll figure out the timing and we'll see you 3 years from next Tuesday. All right. Well, having said that, let's get on to virtual assistants. And I've thought about it myself. Donna and I are pretty busy. I'm busy at work. Sometimes I thought maybe, when we're so busy in my real estate department that we don't know whether we're coming or going, maybe a virtual assistant could help us. I haven't taken it any further because you actually have to spend some time on working out who the people are and what they could do for you. But I don't really know anything about it specifically, except the concept that somebody who isn't like next door to you or in the same town of you could help you if you're busy. So tell us about the practicalities of hiring a virtual assistant.
I'll start. So the irony is that to be effective in hiring a virtual assistant, you need time. You actually need time to set it up. It is not a one and done. Of course, if you're asking for a task that's in one and done, perfect. And that's really generic and like book me a flight type of thing, that could be one and done. But the reality is particularly as an investor, when you're looking at virtual assistants, there's what I would think like 4 or 5 skills that you need to have yourself. And I think like time to set this up and really understand what it is you want. You yourself need to be able to manage, because you do still need to manage this person as much as they're doing the task for you. A lot of times they're doing drafts or they've got to meet deadlines. So you've got to kind of get really comfortable with managing. So if you've managed in your day job before, you want to bring those skills back out and bring them back on the table, because it's imperative that you have that ability to kind of give someone direction and guidance. And I'd say that probably the number one is communication. I think that's where there's been some, kind of things, expectations were high and productivity was low because maybe the communication wasn't there sometimes, or the interpretation of how you explained it, because, they're not mind readers, but sometimes you think they are. So I'd say those are like the big primaries in terms of when you're looking at yourself and where you need to be before you even think about someone coming on.
Yeah, no, I get that. If you can't say to your assistant specifically what you need in detail, have time to work with them. I mean, if you don't barely have time to say hello, how do you expect someone who knows nothing about you to help you? I mean, can't work, can it? Can't work. Okay, well, no, I get that. So all you folks, don't just think you're going to find someone's name and email them and they're just going to take the whole load off you, because that is not going to happen. Not going to
Not at
happen.
all. No.
What about you, Andrea? What?
Yeah, so I've been using virtual assistant since 2009. And part of it was because I had taken the creative strategies courses. I was doing a lot of phone calling and I was very actively buying and managing my own rental properties. Now, before this point, I had like a full-time assistant, but like Julia mentioned, monitoring that person, making sure you're actually getting value for money. I wasn't feeling like I was getting the value for money. I felt like I was paying for somebody to sit in my house and not really accomplish what I was hoping to accomplish. And I think that sometimes, we want to offload some of the skill set that we have and the strength that we have. So what I did is I went on to Upwork.com, which is, a very well-known virtual assistant place. Well, you can get people to do almost anything on Upwork.com, but you can actually look up somebody's resume. They'll suggest people to you depending on your price range and the skill sets that you want, and you can actually see how they do in their English skills and their typing skills, Word, Excel, all these types of things. And so what I really looked for was somebody with clear English skills. And so I made the decision to choose somebody actually from North America. We often hear about people from overseas and how cheap it is. But for me, it was really important to have English as a first language at that time. And so I ended up finding a lady who was a stay-at-home mom, and she worked for $10 an hour. Like, it was pretty cheap, but she was educated too. She actually had her nursing degree. Her parents had been realtors. She understood a little bit about real estate. And so I got her to do everything that I could think of. And the great thing through Upwork is when she's working on my file, she had to log into Upwork and basically hit start, and they would randomly take screenshots of what she was doing. And so that was a way for Upwork to kind of manage her on my behalf. So I would pay Upwork, they would take 10%, and she would get the other 90%. And so what I soon found was I went from having a full-time person to somebody who was only working 10 hours a week. And so I saved a lot of money because I was paying somebody less per hour. I didn't have to pay any government contributions as an employee. These are contractors to me. And she was fantastic. I got her an online number for like $15 a month. And so she became like my property management assistant. So she would set up all my showings, and she would have sent all of these people ahead of time the rental application, what they needed to bring to the showing with them, any of that type of information. So I would just show up, and all these people would be waiting for me to show them the property with a filled in application, copies of, pay stubs, their damage deposit check, everything. So it was fantastic. And then what I would do with those applications is I would go home and I would scan them and email them to her and get her to do all the reference checks, because I thought, how can I get her to do as much as possible? So I did everything from having her do all the advertising, setting up all the appointments, and I told her when I was available so she could set up as many bulk showings as possible. And then I also had her set up all the repairs and maintenance. So if we needed a new fridge, she would shop around, see who had the best deal on a new fridge, make all the arrangements with the tenant for the delivery and all that kind of stuff. And she even helped me with simple Excel spreadsheets. So when I was doing my investor year-end reports, I can send her the raw data. She would put it in a nice little package in the Excel spreadsheets for me. And it was fantastic. And so I had that gal for 2 years. And the only reason she quit is she was doing from home to become a legal assistant. And so she was kind of transitioning. But I so enjoyed having somebody who was a self-starter. And I think that's another important thing when it comes to virtual assistants. They need to be self-starters and really want to engage in the work. And I think it's easier in some ways when you do have somebody with ongoing hours. So 10 hours a week, she worked for me, 40 hours a month. and it was, you know, a reliable income for her. And I knew that everything was being taken care of.
Yeah. You know, that sounds like she was everybody's dream, the perfect virtual assistant, from pay to reliability to what the number of tasks that she could do, great English skills, educated, and, you know, kind of working by the hour. Wow, that sounds just perfect. I'm sure you were very sad to lose her.
I
And
was.
then now you're, I guess you're looking, when she was finished after 2 years, you're looking for someone to replace her. And I'm guessing that person, that perfect person, well, perfect is hard to find anyway. You were fortunate to have her. What about finding her replacement? Or did you need a replacement because you'd gone on to a different way of handling things?
Yeah. So as in my real estate journey, as I got more properties under my belt, I did start with a local gal who would then, you know, end up to be kind of, she still works part-time for me actually, but she started out part-time, and then she would also double as my cleaner. So anytime I needed any cleaning done, she would go and clean it. And she was also kind of handy. So I gave her some simple handyman stuff too to begin with. And so the how I know she was a good cleaner is because I went to clean with her initially, and she was telling me where I missed everything. So
And
she
you thought you
was,
were a good cleaner, I'm sure.
well, not really, but she was more fussy than I was. So then I started to get her to do all the move-ins and move-outs inspections because she was very detail oriented. And so, unfortunately, she didn't drive, which was like, oh, but you know, everything else she could do. And so, if it was kind of within walking or bicycle distance of where she lived, she would do it. Or if her boyfriend could give her a ride, she would do it. So then she ended up to start doing some of the showings and even, you know, lawn care at some of the places. So I kind of graduated to that, to eventually, you know, when I handed off my properties to a property manager, um, you know, and me being one of the property managers helping look out, it's interesting because you can actually find virtual assistants that really super specialize. And so we use this property management system called Buildium. And I got connected to a company in India that they help people with their property management. And so they manage the whole back end of all the accounting of the software. They do all the reconciliation, etc. And it's $8 US per hour. The average cost to me is like $50 a month. It's crazy. And they balance all the accounts, they balance all the tenants' accounts, and you know, they offer other services that I don't use, but to me that was like, you mean I don't have to learn the ins and outs of all the accounting of this?
Yeah.
Neither does my bookkeeper have to learn all the ins and outs of it. So, you know, it's really nice when you can find people who specialize in some of these niche areas of real estate.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's in my mind, we're always talking to a virtual assistant, a person that you're dealing with. But this is a company who does that for you and for lots of other folks virtually. So they are a bigger, I guess, more focused virtual assistant. I never even thought of that, but that sounds. What about you, Julia? Tell us about your experience with virtual assistants, and tell us
So
about it.
I've had folks who are literally virtual, like they don't come to me. Like Andrea's been fortunate; they eventually come to her, and It's been a mix. I've used some people from Fiverr. I've used people from Upwork. I've used a North American company straight out of Toronto, and I've had different experiences. Like Andrea, I used the one out of Toronto at that time. I was looking for them to help with some editing and content stuff, and so I wanted that kind of higher level. Now, the problem with that was that I was paying two people. I was paying their management, plus I was paying the worker. And the tough thing about it was there was a system of, yes, we can do everything. And it was almost, I spent a lot of time having to kind of get them on board with what we were looking for, as opposed to just like, here's the task and do it. And so, and it was almost because they were maybe a little bit over advanced for what we were asking for. So that was one tricky situation there. Whereas I find with Fiverr and Upwork, I've found I've had some glitches, but what I've come to conclude with them is if it's a one-time task, they tend to be really good, in the sense of, like, for example, we needed a photo that we were putting on a website, and we had to have plots laid out, and easy. Like, we needed someone who could do a good design. We gave them a draft. Here's the design. Get it done. So one-off situations, I like Fiverr and Upwork for that. However, if I'm going to bring someone on to do more kind of management of direct things, like related to property management, so like email filtering, replying back to tenants, this type of thing, I've actually used a person that I've known. And what I've done is I've talked a lot to some of my friends and some of my, even a family member who had someone graduating out of university and was in between going back to another program. And they were looking for part-time work. And as you know, these kids are all super tech savvy. And it was amazing the amount of suggestions that there was a higher level of problem solving skills. And the amount of suggestions that they had around how to set up systems was pretty incredible. And so it was, it was a sit down explanation. This is what I need. How can we do it? And a great example is like an email system. How to coordinate and where to put emails and where to file things. It was one thing that I could learn some of it, but it really took a lot off my plate once they were able to do it. And one thing I did differently than Andrea was I have had that individual create an SOP for me as we've been going, because I know she's leaving me. Like, there's no doubt she's going, because she's going back to school. So because I've managed a lot of people in my career, it was always about having an SOP. It was always about having a manual. How do you do this? How do you do that task? Because we were like broken records, constantly repeating ourselves. So I initiated that right out of the gate is, hey, when you set up all those emails, or when you do the filtering of the emails, or take everything out of the email box and put it into the proper place in the drive, tell us how you're doing it. Write it out. Give me a little script. So that's been an advantage, because as soon as this person walks on, it'll be just that much easier. And what I'll be able to do is maybe just do a video of me talking about the system, and then be able to actually give it to someone that maybe isn't English isn't their first language, because they'll be able to have a point of reference. So I've had some good luck in that respect, for sure. And I think for me, having an assistant has come pretty natural, because I've always had an assistant in my career. We have rehab assistants all the time. But they tend to do more of our treatments, but they have to do a lot of relaying back. So the communication piece has had to be really strong. And I think with like in real estate, that's been probably the biggest thing. I found that there's some things that I'd be like, oh, for example, can you write the ad? Can you write the ad for my place? So they'd start writing the ad, and, maybe it's, not what I would write, or not what I would think would be. But then I got to a place where I was like, stop being so critical. They started it. They did a draft. Now you go in, you correct it and post and get them to post it. So you have to want to be able to, like, one, teach them, but then two, you can't just, things have to be proofread still. Like, and you, because it is a business and they're not real estate investors themselves. So there's that side of like being able to have to go back. And I think a real important thing is, what is it you want them to do? Like, Andrea slowly built her person up to do different things. And I feel like some of the places where it goes awry is when you give them too many things at once. I love the comment she made about, like, I only had 10 hours. It's the silliest thing to start something and have lots of hours, because then you get into the situation of like, no bang. I don't know if I'm getting my bang for my buck.
Yeah.
And so there's something about, hiring people specific for things. Like, and I think the biggest one is if you're a self-manager, there are so many tasks in property management that you can assign. Like I just mentioned, you can have them do your ads, you can have them enhance your photos. They can edit. If you do a virtual tour, they can edit your tour. They can screen your tenants for you. All you have to do is tell them, answer back with these questions. If they set up a form in Google Drive, they can monitor the form. Like, there's so many little tasks. And how I think about it is, anything that's repeatable, anything that I'm repeating constantly, that's what I'm assigning. And, or things I hate to do.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. There's a lot of things that are minutia and you hate to do them. And I throw them on there. And I just want to throw one little thing, because a lot of people say that they're like, I don't even know what I would assign them, or I just randomly give them things. It's the worst thing you can do, is randomly give them things, because it's just not structured. There's this great matrix, and we just covered this in one of our book club, the Eisenhower matrix, where you do, you delegate, you delete, and what's the other one? Do now, delegate, delete, decide if you're going to do it. Basically, anything you put in delegate and delete, that's what you can give to a virtual assistant.
Yeah.
Like, bottom line. And there's something to be said about brain dump everything you do everything, write down everything you do in your business, pick what you hate and pick what's repeatable. And there you go. You can start your system. Put a little cheat sheet together for them and start with 1 or 2 tasks, see how it goes.
Yeah. No, I see that. You can, the things that are repeatable, things that you hate, you take the tasks individually, you break them down into steps that you can maybe do what you said. You can create your own operating procedure as you're instructing, and then you get them to do it. Yeah. And then task by task by task, you can pass them off. And of course you can't do it all at once. Yeah. You wouldn't be able to, would you? You got to start with, I guess, the ones that are important then that you hate. Maybe those are the
and if someone had said in when I guess when Donna put this up that we were doing this, someone had said, I need a virtual assistant to manage my family. Someone made that as a joke, LOL. But the truth is, that is stuff you can do, because, you can have them book an Airbnb. You can have them book flights. You can have them book a dentist appointment, a hair appointment. Like, if you have, you can use so many systems. Like, if you have, like, you can use Doodle, where it's like, or Calendarly, where you're specifying where your open spots are. Why wouldn't you? I hate going back and forth with the hairdresser, text messaging her 50 times to understand what days she can have. Like, so there's so many other things that are small stuff that you could assign, and they take a lot off your plate, because you're always like, oh, I didn't do that. Oh, I didn't do that. And it's mentally exhausting. So it's okay to add those types of things in once you're comfortable with the person, and and they have more control over your calendar or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I get that. I've got a couple of doctor's appointments that I have not yet booked.
See,
I've got a tennis date with someone that I have not yet booked. A promise that I haven't done it. Yeah, Donna. Hey,
I'm busy.
I'm offering this to you.
No.
This would be.
Oh,
Yeah.
nobody knows I'm right beside you.
Good. Well, as long as they don't know you're right beside me. I have to be on my mettle here, or if she's right beside me.
Is she right behind me?
So these are all, I mean, I hope people are hearing some of the things that you have to think about as you consider hiring a virtual assistant. They can be an individual person. They could be a company that just does things that you need to do. On the accounting side with Buildium and the company in India, that was really interesting. They can help you in your personal life. Maybe your personal life's easier to organize than your investing life, and that's where you need help so you can spend more time on investing. So then, in terms of finding them, Upworks and Fiverr, are those the two? I mean, I'm guessing there's lots of sites, but are those two major ones?
I think those are like the more popular ones. But again, I take those with a grain of salt because they have a lot of control over the individual. Like, for instance, you can't do direct emailing with them. It has to be all on their site. There's no direct contact. So it's tough. Like, if you don't establish times that they're going to be online, you're like, hey, is it done? And there's no response because it's like 2 o'clock in the morning for them. So establishing those types of rules, if you're using those individuals that are in other countries, is imperative. Otherwise, you're wasting time constantly going back to the site. And interesting, I just want to make a point to the Fiverr and Upworks. So interesting how Andrea, I've done the reverse of what Andrea's done. I've actually posted a job. So I've posted a job on there and then have people apply for it. And I had read a tip once, and what happens is a bazillion people apply for it because they send automated responses, and then it's like, it's overwhelming. But I had read a tip somewhere, and I don't know where I read this, that they said when you do your ad, what you should do is put a trick question in there. Like, write your thing, say like, I want you to be able to do data entry. I want you to be able to do editing, booking appointments, this, that, and then say, when you reply, please start your reply with the number 5. And that was a way to weed people out. Did they actually read your whole ad? And I thought that was genius because it was like, because otherwise they'll reply to everything and they'll say they can do everything. And you really got to be careful with that because you can go back and forth with these people quite a bit.
Yeah. That's, we worked with folks on Fiverr to do a few things, and that was difficulty with, I can do everything till you drill down to what folks can really, really do. Andrea, on the, some of your opening comments, you wanted someone from North America who has English as a first language. Now, did you want that because you thought those folks might have a better sense of what goes on in North America, or you just didn't want any kind of accent to be a problem in communicating? What was your thinking on that?
Part of it was communication. The other part of it is that if they're going to be the emergency contact, I'd rather have them on a similar time zone as to what we're on. Sure. And so that made it a lot easier. So their business hours are my business hours. Whereas with the folks in India doing the accounting, I love that I can email them during my working hours, and by the time I get up, the answer's already there, or they've already done the work. But that's not something where I need, immediate contact. But I felt like when I needed immediate contact or somebody to be able to answer the phone if there's a rental emergency, I just felt a lot better about them being in a similar time zone and being able to communicate clearly.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit. Let's get into a few more specifics. So for people on the creative side of real estate, a lot of people, well, you have to find folks to help. I mean, usually on the creative side, we're helping people that have problems. And so you have to find who those people are. And so, I mean, we all know that you can find those people in different ways, but many people create a website, they wrap their car, they advertise, they do some social media things. They're looking to generate calls to them or contacts to them where somebody says, I'm in trouble and maybe you can help me. And so I think what we know on the creative side is that you can get 100 calls and maybe have 10 worth pursuing and 5 that maybe have a deep dive and maybe 1 or 2 or 3 that work out. I'm not sure if that's the number, but there's a lot of winnowing. There's a lot of things that come in the top of the big old funnel and not many that come out the bottom. So if folks who are listening are on that side of things, trying to gather prospects, how would they use a virtual assistant? Let's say they're looking for rent-to-own people.
So one of the services that I used very early on was called patlive.com. Now, PatLive is from the US, and they actually, if you give them a list of questions, I used to do when people were calling as motivated sellers, they would answer all those questions and email or text them to me so I could see how urgent somebody was. Now, on the rent-to-own side, people aren't quite as urgent, but you can still use PatLive to answer your phone. So if you have a dedicated number, either for rent-to-owns or for seller financing, you would have that phone number directed to PatLive, and they would answer with the script that you gave them. And you know, they sound, it's very clear, they're friendly, and then you can have somebody kind of do that preamble for you. Sure. And it works really well. And they charge like a flat rate, monthly rate, or there was different plans that you could opt into. And so I think that's a great way because those people are already trained to talk on the phone. And I think that just as a general statement, people actually appreciate hearing a woman's voice on the phone when they're in distress. Mm-hmm. And when somebody can speak slowly and clearly and is listening, it's a lot easier to get information out of people. Sure. So that's not that a man couldn't answer PatLive on the phone, but what I found is if I had a virtual assistant who liked to talk on the phone and was a little bit more chatty, it's actually better, especially if you're dealing with people who have lots of questions and you want to make sure that you're answering all those questions. So for example, if you had a frequently asked questions for rent-to-owns and you gave that to the person who's answering the phone for you, whether it's a dedicated person or a service like PatLive, then they could go through and answer all those frequently asked questions. They would have the information in front of them to do so. And I think that when you can pre-qualify these people, because when I was having a lot of rent-to-own people call me and I had my website, dedicated website set up, it can be a lot of work, right? Because you have to find out, okay, what is their credit history like? If they had, major credit event, what was it about? Like, tell me more. Like, I need the story. And so, with rent-to-owns, it's more like cultivating a relationship over the phone and the whole story. Whereas sometimes with motivated sellers, it's like, how quick can you get there? You need to know, is this person motivated, truly motivated or not? Or are they just wanting some information? How does it work? And they're not really motivated, but they thought they would phone the phone number and find out how it works. So, those are just some considerations. And that's kind of what I can see.
Yeah, I can see with rent-to-own, you can work up a nice script, and then you could have the frequently asked questions so that maybe you're not offering to answer all those, but if they happen to ask that question, the PatLive person or your dedicated person would have and say, well, I can answer that for you. So you do have to, as folks understand, if you're attracting a lot of interest in whatever creative strategy you're looking to implement, if you're getting a lot of calls or a lot of emails, there's only so much time that you have. And again, as Julia said, what's repetitive? And that's certainly on the repetitive side. There might not be on the I hate it side. You might love talking to people, or you might not, but it would be at least repetitive. And if it's repetitive, you can create a system around it, and you can tweak it, and you can improve it, it never stays the same as when you started out, because people say, well, what about? So yeah, that's a really good example on both on the rent to own side and on the I need help now side. I'm going bankrupt tomorrow. Can you help me? That's the one where you have to poke at that one and get moving. You can't wait 2 weeks for that one to show up. I know our friends Roman and Janet Seniak say that whenever there's somebody who is a real prospect, you drop whatever you're doing and get the heck over there, because everyone should know that if they've called you, you're not the only one who says we can help if you have problems. They're calling anybody whose name they can find, and often if you get there quickly, you'll be the one to garner that prospect. So, what about you, Julia? When you're thinking specifically on the creative side of things, I don't know if there's anything on the joint venturing side. Joint venturing is a little trickier because of Securities Commission rules when you're trying to gather in folks who would help you. So maybe that's not as good an example.
Yeah, no, I think if anything, it would be more if you had someone who was like a personal assistant who maybe would be doing up follow-up calls for you. So, i.e., they're booking an appointment for your lawyer call. They're booking an appointment for, like if it's a multifamily, to look at the environmental, and that's maybe how, if you're the working partner in a JV partnership, that's probably how you could potentially go about using. And what you'd have to do is like create a Google Doc where you list all the service providers and be like, hey, this has to happen this week, this has to happen this week, whatever. And then kind of have them kind of set up the calls, and of course have access to your calendar so they can slot in, hey, yeah, you're available here, making sure that they allocate driving time to get you to and from where you need to go. And this is what I meant when I first, right at the beginning, said you need time. You need to be organized and managed yourself so that then this person can actually work into your life. Otherwise, you're the bottleneck. Yeah. You become the bottleneck to them being productive. And then we complain that they're not doing what we want. And it's kind of like, wait a second. So you've got to be pretty on top of things. And I think if you, again, repeated things, once you do one JV, these are the next steps that you go with: letter of intent, the agreement itself, if there's other documents that need to be signed, it's pretty standard. Like, hey, I need a lawyer's appointment. I need to discuss this. And if you're having a meeting with your virtual assistant weekly, you're like, here's our top priorities moving for this week. Yeah. And thus you're giving them some direction.
Okay. All right. Question here. What seems like a great thing to delegate, but you never would? What seems like a great thing to delegate, but you never would?
Direct contact with the tenants, talking directly when there's a massive issue. I would never use, Andrea had like an in-person assistant who she had more kind of, it was almost like an employee-employer, but if I had a virtual assistant from a system, like an organization, do not think that I would go there, especially if it was a bit of an issue.
You would always personally take care of a big tenant issue, because
if I was the one self-managing and I was using the person to help me with things, yeah, I'd say, hey, that's an issue for me to handle versus you handling it. That, in my opinion.
No, those if it's something of that's blown up or is of great importance, those are one-offs. Those are typically unique, and you can't. Pretty hard to give your virtual assistant a script and frequently asked questions. Yeah, I agree that would be one. I mean, you're at the head of of your own organization. When there's trouble, you got to stand up for it and take care of it. And if that problem kept repeating.
I think similar to that, if you have joint venture partners, or if you're managing as an example for other people, you don't want the virtual assistant talking to the owners or your joint venture partners. You need to do that.
Yeah. No, I think that's absolutely true. All right. Now, so let's do a bit of a summary here. I think Julia's point and Andrew's point too, that you have to you have to take some time to figure out what it is that you're doing with your business. Got to break it down. I think you got to break it down into all the little steps that you do for everything. And that takes, as Julia said, time. You have to go through it. You got to be scrupulous about knowing exactly what it takes to accomplish a task. And that will take time for you to sit and do that. And if you have lots of tasks, it'll take quite a bit of time. But if you can't break down the task into its component parts and be able to explain them all to a virtual assistant, then be very difficult for them to help. So for you folks who are listening, you should be thinking about what it is that you do in your creative real estate investing, what it is that you're doing in your family life, because I like the idea of getting a virtual assistant to help with everyone's very busy family lives, and break down those tasks. Which ones do you hate? Which ones are repetitive? And then break them down so that you could have a shot at properly explaining it to your proposed virtual assistant. What else did I like? Not overloading them at the beginning. A task or two to see how they do. Review. How did you do that? What what part of my instructions were unclear? Oh, I see that I didn't quite say that. Okay, let's revise that one. So don't overload them is, I think, another good one. What other really beginning things should people emphasize? I know we talked about a lot, and those were two big ones.
I know for sure. The one that I felt's been super helpful is have them create your SOP if you don't have one.
Right.
Like that is, because that's gold when they leave you. Because that could be a lot, that can be very time consuming as well.
In itself. So SOP, is that standard operating procedure?
Yep. It could be standard operating procedure. Right. It could be your checklist. You don't have to be fancy. But at the end of the day, what are the steps you take to do something, especially if they've created the system for you?
Yes.
That is key, because I'm not going to take time to learn it. So if you've created it, I want to know how to do it, because now I may not have someone in between you, but moreover, then I just want someone else to do it moving forward, right?
Yeah. Yeah. For stuff you're telling them how to do it, that's one thing. You've essentially created the SOP by giving them the very specific list of steps and questions and things to do. But when you're getting them to create, once they work on and create, they got to be able to write it down, email it, and give it back to you so you can give it to the next person, because virtual assistants do not stay forever, do they?
Mm-hmm.
No, they don't stay forever.
And the good ones are always in between something. They come to you and they're in between something.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, they're gig workers maybe, and they just don't have a gig right now, but they're talented, and so they work for you for a while, and they go, well, it's been nice, Julia, but I've got this great job on a film that's going to last me for 8 months. We're going to travel the world, all expenses paid. And so see ya. Mm-hmm. And off they go. What about you, Andrea? Apart from those items, what starting out things should people have right at the front of their mind?
Well, I started out, using Upwork, and somebody had asked in the chat where I found the people in India. That was also through Upwork. And so I just encourage you to acquaint yourself with how Upwork works. Like Julia gave that great tip if you're posting a job. But, don't be afraid to interview a few people. I did that first before hiring somebody. I wanted to gauge for myself what their skill set was and kind of get to know them, because if I'm going to put them in front of my tenants, I need to make sure that, they're not going to be harsh or hard to understand or anything like that. I want somebody really personable.
Yeah, somebody who speaks English quite well, and somebody who, I guess when you're interviewing, you can get a sense of how people are, can't you? I mean, mm-hmm. People project who they are, and they can, you can put it on for the interview, but you can't change yourself completely. So you should be able to get some sense of what a person is like. Your comment about Pat Live and having a woman ask those questions, I think that's a point well taken, that I think we've noticed over the years that women, as a general comment, make better investors than men because they are a little more patient, a little more introspective. They think about things. Men are barging along, generally speaking, and so that's another thing to think about. Without, I mean, this is not we're not doing a gender-based thing here, but we're saying who has the skills that we need, and if it happens to be women, then you should be looking for women to help you. If that's the kind of help that you need. Now, Donna, do we have any more questions? Yes, we do.
Just a
Brenda, part of the trio, the Ace Life Investors trio. This is Brenda, who's here but not here. Just be aware of the time difference. I have a virtual assistant in India. It can be challenging to communicate effectively. Yes, big time difference there. So we also, Don and I have someone who helps us with computer things in India, and he's available somehow whenever we want to talk. He's available. I think he must have adapted himself to North American time. He has a lot of North American clients. But yes, if your VA is in a different time zone, especially quite a few time zones away from you, you have to be aware of that so you can be efficient with the back and forth. Any more questions there, Donna?
No, and
Are we good?
remember, it's like 1 a.m. for Julia.
It's 1 a.m. for Julia. Well, she's in Portugal. They're just going out for drinks now, right? They've had a big, siesta, the big supper. Now it's time to get out and party. Maybe not 1 o'clock. Well, I wouldn't put it past Julia, would you? Look at her.
Hell no.
He looks like it. Hell no, said Donna. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on, you guys. Happy to hear Ace Life Investors is going well. Hope lots of people get in touch. And this has been very, very instructive for people. I hope everybody listening takes it to heart as they get busy. They all get busy and hope they need a virtual assistant because they got so many things to do that they need to pass it off, and that they take these tips and do it well. Donna says, do it before you get busy.
Yeah.
Because you're planning to get busy. Yes. It's like going to see your accountant and
The
saying,
bigger one is do it before you get burnt out, because when
Burnt
you're
out,
burnt
yeah.
out, then you can't instruct someone else when you're tapped. So
no, that's
I
great.
agree.
Yeah, if your plan is to achieve a certain level of busyness, then if you're on that path and you see that you're moving where you should be, get going early on the virtual assistant side of things, because when you get really busy, it's just so hard to slow down and do what you need to do to be able to successfully hire and use a virtual assistant. So with that finishing comment, we'll say thank you very much again. And thanks to both of you for coming on. And Donna, any finishing from you? You're just going to stay beside me.
Yeah, I'm good.
Couldn't you put a hand in the picture so they know you're there? There. All right. Good night, everybody. Thanks. We'll see you later.